It's toxic, but you overlook that.
Welcome to another video featuring the 6.28 tier list. As there had been a couple of changes in the recent patch 6.28, which might or might not affect the performance of certain jobs, I wanted to quickly share my assumptions and ideas of how that could affect the overall balancing. Therefore, please be nice and don't mold over the opinion of a shitty Final Fantasy XIV player that doesn't even play Ultimate content right now. And if you're mean, I will let Mark do the next tier list again.
I will not be explaining anything, I will not take any questions, goodbye.
And you will get no explanation whatsoever. And in a more serious tone, tier lists are pointless. This game has shown multiple times that every form of its content can and will be cleared by each and every job available, even if it might take a quick hotfix from Square. Which also means play the job you find interesting or that suits your playstyle, your party setup, or just how you identify yourself with the game. In most cases, this will result in a much better performance than pushing yourself to play an unfitting meta choice. Also, this list goes basically for raiding, but some aspects can be applied to multiple forms of content like dungeons and even Criterion dungeons as well. Starting with the tanks, the changes to Warrior and previously to Paladin brought them up a considerable amount, especially when we stop looking at these weird bar charts and take a closer look at the score summary, which is the same analysis but in simple percentage numbers. The difference between tanks here become more and more subtle. Even on the absolute highs, you cannot really filter out a winner as there's still some defensive aspect that needs to be put onto the balance scale. Yes, a Gunbreaker and Dark Knight might still have the lead here, however it had grown much closer, and even if a clear trend shows tendencies of the player base to favor the other tanks over a Paladin, I guess it is due to how the other tanks are more liked by the majority. However, the whole scenery becomes slightly different when taking a look at the maximum performance of the A DPS chart, and why do they differ so much when tanks have no offensive raid buffs themselves? Simply from the fact that R DPS somehow devaluates the aspect that a Dark Knight can squeeze its raid buffs better into the big party buff window than the other tanks do, where a Paladin has to alter the standard openers and rotations a bit to reach that goal at all. So on this chart we can see a trend of better performance for the Gunbreaker and especially the Dark Knight, which actually matters more as this is the DPS you pump into raid buffs and into your enemies. That means for tanks, A DPS is definitely the chart to go for, because none of them offers any buff to other raid members, so artificially cutting off real world performance for the sake of measuring is not reasonable here, and only serves the purpose of watching the scalability of a Dark Knight with raid buffs compared to a Paladin for example. Which means for raiding there is a clear S-rank tank in the form of the Dark Knight, followed by the Gunbreaker on A+, followed by the Warrior and Paladin on A. However, if dungeons are something you do frequently, especially Criterion, Warrior is a beast and definitely an S-tier choice as well, due to how much stress it takes away from the healers. That mentioned, healers are also very much the same, only their healing support differs and how they can utilize their big cooldowns, especially those that affect certain raid mechanics or even soak them entirely. So here we follow further down the road of subjective likability. Choose the healer you like and think is fun to play, especially on how it counters raid mechanics. All of them are equally viable, and while the number of parses indicate a trend towards the White Mage and Sage, Astrologian and Scholar are technically strong as well, and sometimes even outperform their competition, especially as the Scholar still has the unique mass sprint ability, that the other healers don't have an equivalent for. So according to some people's feedback and that Sage is the chart topper in healing while still dealing the same amount of damage as the others, that is my S tier choice, followed by the Scholar on A+ for the sprint and the others being on A. Above that, the Sage is a monster in dungeons, and every time I had one by my side as tank, it felt way too easy to deal with big packs of mobs. And I guess a Sage comes in handy in Criterion as well, if you're able to manage its kit efficiently. But the others are definitely not a bad choice either. Alright, before coming to the more interesting choices and those that could still use some balancing efforts from Square Enix, the last patch seems to have fixed a whole bunch of issues and I'm astonished how good it looks on the overview. Especially the melee jobs are so well balanced now that differences are barely visible at all. The only exception here might be the Samurai that does underperform a bit on the maximum performance, but the overall result as well as the ADPS charts do grant it the right to be considered a beast still. On the other side, the ranged tag seems to be present still, as melee jobs are performing slightly better than any ranged physical job or caster, except the Black Mage, but the gap is getting smaller with each patch it seems. So according to that consideration, melees can be considered S tier. While the Samurai has a slight dip in maximum performance, which technically brings it in line with some of the ranged class, so if you're very nitpicky, the Samurai is one soft step below the others, let's say A+. Black Mage also leans towards that roster because its maximum performance is breathtaking, as well as the A DPS results, turning it into the second best choice for the actual numbers seen on your ACT after the Samurai. However, even as some might hate the Black Mage's special treatment for how the party might be forced to play around some aspects of the fight to optimize the Black Mage's DPS output, it is still a thing. Even though we are seeing improvements on that side with every expansion and new set of utility the Black Mage has at its disposal. Therefore, let us make the compromise and grant it the A+ spot as well, due to how much it seems to perform better compared to the last patch. Okay, what about Red Mage and Summoner? According to my personal power tests, those jobs have come together very closely now, and the small difference between them can easily be compensated by the fact that Red Mage has the better raising capabilities of not being restricted by swift cast. Summoner on the other hand can be seen as the superior option for movement heavy fights. But to be honest, the decision here should be done according to what you favor from the playstyle aspect or what suits your overall appearance and theme more. I would personally grant them the A+ tier for their raises, but A seems absolutely reasonable, especially as their maximum performance falls visibly and measurably behind the competition. On the ranged physical roster, Bard and Dancer produce a very solid performance. And here it is very good to see them slap on the peak level. Yes, the average score is slightly behind melee jobs, but when you master these ranged supporters, you will be granted the reward for it, and outperform even a Summoner or Red Mage due to how much the other party members benefit from your buffs. And I guess this will even increase with time as the scalability is exponential here, and the more your party pushes into the important 2-minute burst windows, the better your performance will look. However, there's even more due to some defensive mitigation skills and utility, so just raw DPS numbers are a bit difficult to take into account in isolated testing. But so is the raising aspect, and it's still an invaluable trait to have, so I would not grant these two a better spot than a Red Mage or Summoner, so a very even A rank performance here as well. Unfortunately though, even as this doesn't go in line with my personal power testings, because the Machinist came as close to the Black Mage as never before, these charts do show a different picture. It really indicates that Machinist is the only job that still needs a bit of work to be spent on. On the other hand, it is as close as never before, and in real world or not utterly optimized raid scenarios, the Machinist will perform just fine. And it doesn't lack any power at all. Only the 1% best of players will notice the difference, and the average party finder Joe might even be astonished of how big those blasts get now in their little DPS helper tool. So to make the final spot a reasonable one, A- for the Machinist. Which brings us to the conclusion. When Square addresses the man or woman with the machine gun and track the aspect of scalability in future patches, we might actually have one of the best balancings for a long time. So now is the time to embrace this fact and enjoy whatever job you like the most from its design, gameplay aspect, or simply the style it is rocking. All of these jobs have cleared the relevant content, all of these jobs will have full access to Gold Saucer, and all of them will have sexy bikini glams, leading to a great outcome, and I hope you agree with my assumptions. If not, let me know your ranking in the comment section. And let me tell you, while this game is not perfect, the balancing is very close to it. So props to Team Yoshida for that, and I wish you a wonderful time with the job you love. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep loving Final Fantasy.